Welcome back. Closing arguments wrapped up just over a week ago in Hank Greenberg's case against the government over the bailout of AIG. Greenberg is seeking $40 billion in damages for shareholders, and a decision is expected this summer. Joining me right now in a Fox Business exclusive is former AIG CEO Hank Greenberg, the CEO and chairman of CV Star. Good to see you, Hank.
Good to see you.
Thank you so much for joining us. So first, I want to ask you about your lawsuit and the closing arguments. I was happy to see you there, continuing to fight the good fight. What are your observations on where you are so far in this?
Well, as you know, I can't really talk much about it. I did go to the closing arguments. I couldn't go to during the trial itself because I was supposed to be a witness, although I was never called. But I did go down for the closing arguments. I was very pleased the way it went. But I don't think it's appropriate for me to talk about it.
And at the end of the day, the issue is very clear-cut, and that is that the government acquired 79.9% of AIG in a time of stress, and then they charged the company 14% interest rates.
That's correct.
It was an overreach. Hank, let me ask you about, sort of that story as well as the broad regulation environment. Have you seen a big change in terms of how regulation and litigation and a bigger government has impacted business today?
No question about it. It's changed dramatically. Business creates the jobs in the country. If you punish business for whatever reason, because of politics or because of different viewpoints, who are you hurting? You're hurting the country. Unemployment really doesn't get filled out the way it should. Employment. You can't pay the wages you'd like to pay if you're not making the profits that you would like to make. And so who loses? Everybody loses. The whole country loses. And that is a change that's been fundamentally going on in the country.
Well, I mean, when we see things like the worst financial crisis that that we've seen in a generation, the pendulum tends to swing too much toward regulation. Yes. But what has happened since 2008 is companies are sitting on cash. They're unwilling to invest it and hire new people. You've got Dodd-Frank, you've got Obamacare, you've got the EPA, all of the above.
Exactly right. But generally what happens when it swings too far one direction, it begins to come back. And we have elections coming up another year or so. Hopefully, we'll see a change, and we'll get back to a more normal environment. We're the world's leader, and we seem to have walked off the stage in that regard.
I want to ask you about that because right now we're talking about leading from behind, and we're having these conversations with Iran, and of course you've got the situation in terms of foreign policy, probably the worst that we've seen in a long time.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
In terms of the economy, globally speaking, where do you see the growth? You travel all over the world all the time.
Well, look, I think Asia is the place, from my perspective. Latin America's got problems, in Brazil and Argentina particularly, and so Asia and Europe is really going no place. Socialism has overtaken many countries except Germany, and so yes, there may be some opportunities because of a strong dollar in buying properties in Europe, but it's selective, and so Asia is the place, and it's led by China. The largest, it will be the largest economy in the world.
Right.
It's number 2 now. So how do you miss that? But you have to have a long-term view. You can't go to China and expect instant gratification. It's not going to happen.
And you were the first business guy in China.
That's exactly right.
Back in the day when you took AIG into China. I want to ask you about China, but let me stay in the U.S. for a second before I get to that, because the Barron's magazine cover over the weekend was interesting, talking about the stock market in China rising and the sort of fundamentals not there. In terms of the 2016 election and what you're seeing here in the U.S., do you see a candidate on the GOP side to compete with Hillary Clinton? Who do you think is going to be our next president?
I wish I could answer that with certainty. Look, there's going to right now. There's a whole field of thinking they're going to be running. Very few have announced officially yet, but they're making noises.
Well, we think Jeb Bush is running.
Jeb Bush is running, and I think Scott Walker is running, and the senator from Florida,
Marco Rubio,
is running. My guess is it's going to be one of those three that's going to be the leader, and there may be 2 of them on a ticket. which I think would be good. So we have to wait and see.
So you think with the new president, the regulatory environment does get easier for business?
I think that it would change, especially if we hold the Congress on the Republican side. And I think also we'll take a better leadership role back on the stage on foreign policy. It will help worldwide. Look at the world right now. You got chaos in the Middle East. We're driving China into closer to Russia by our actions. Is that good? The world is not safer with China and Russia closer together than closer to the United States. And I would hope that we have a president that recognizes that and would act accordingly.
All right, we're going to take a short break, but I want to stay on that comment for a second, because how are we driving China into Russia's arms? Is it the most recent trade deals on the table, the Trans-Pacific Partnership? We'll talk about that. Hank, stay with us. Take a short break. More with Hank.